Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing fine. And today we're going to talk about ratio and proportion. Very important topic in mathematical aptitude in UGC NET Paper I. So imagine you and your friends are sharing a pizza. How do you decide who gets how many slices? That's where the concept of ratio comes into play. It's like saying for every 2 slices I get and you get 3. It's a way to compare how much one person gets compared to another. In math, we just use numbers and symbols to describe this comparison instead of slices of pizza. Now you must be wondering what is ratio and proportion, right? So first let me tell you what we're gonna discuss. So in this particular session we'll talk about understanding ratio, then we'll also talk about equivalent ratio and how we simplify ratio, and there will be some activities to do it. And just guess, if I ask you a question like that, how many hours do you spend playing games in a day? So how you gonna answer that? Write in the chat box. And you have to compare with 24, right? 24 hours in a day, and how much do you spend? Write it in ratio on the comment box. But anyway, let's move. So by the end of this session, you will be able to understand the concept of ratio. You will be able to identify and create equivalent ratio, and you will be able to simplify all those ratio that we'll talk about, and how you can apply these ratio to solve real life problems and whatever comes in our way, right? So first let me tell you about the ratio. So basically ratios are used to compare the numbers of one thing to another, and remember it's written in the form of a colon b, which we usually say like a to b. So example, it says we have like 2 apples and 5 bananas. How are you gonna write it? So if we write it like this, 2 is to 5 means we have 2 apples and 5 bananas, right? So in that way you can understand what we are going to talk about. Now let me tell you about different types of ratios. So ratios also have their kinds, like part to part ratio, which we just discussed, like 2 apples and 5 bananas. And then we have part to whole ratio, which is like it is comparing to the whole part, like total fruits we have like how many? 7, right? And we have 2 apples, so we can write like that. Or you can also write in fraction, which is like 2 fraction to 5. So we have this kind of expression in ratio. I hope you understand. And let me tell you about part to part ratio. As I told you, we are comparing from one part to another part. Like here you see we have like 3 volleyballs for every 8 basketballs. So that 3 volleyball we'll just put in the first, and the second is 8 basketballs. So in that way you can understand. And let me tell you the same example with the part to whole ratio. And what is it? It's like comparing one part to the whole part of the quantity, how many balls we have, right? Here we have total in 11 balls, so we are comparing that volleyball to 11 balls. So we can just write one part, which is 3, and the whole balls, which is 11. We can write 3 is to 11, right? Exactly the same way here we have 8 basketballs, and in what, 11 balls in total. So we have to put first part and then the whole. And the same process we can do with the fraction, right? So you can write it like that. And this can be expressed through fraction. So we exactly like wrote in the previous slide, like 3 to 11, we can write exactly like this, 3 upon 11, which is like simple, right? So that ratio can be expressed in fraction. So both are kind of same here, and we can also simplify later, and let me tell you about this. So first, to check point, I want to know how many answer I'll get in the chat box. So tell me, what is the first one? We have total how many? Can you count and write the answer? Pause this slide and write the answer in the comment box. So here is our answer, right? You can see we have total Part to part, if we do that, we have like 7 lemons and what, 10 oranges. So in that way you can write it. And part to whole, the similar way you have to do that and you'll find the answer. And you can also that write that part to whole in fraction, which is like 7 to 17 and 10 to 70, right? I hope you get the, what we are discussing. Now let me tell you about the equivalent ratio. So which is basically what it refers to, two or more ratios that have the same value. So as you can see over your screen, we have 1:3, and if we have to make it equivalent, or you can just simplify, if you are given like 2:6, it can easily further simplify. You can divide it with 2 and you'll get the answer 1:3. So multiplying or dividing both parts of the ratio by the same number will result in an equivalent ratio. Suppose let's move down to the further and we make it like 4 and 12. It'll be the same, right? So that's how equivalent ratio works. Now let me tell you about how you simplify more. Suppose you are given like 5:10. So you know that it can be divided by 5 and we'll get the simplified answer. So if we divide, we'll get like 1:2. So that's how you're gonna simplify a ratio, and it can be like larger number or maybe more. That how you can simplify, right? And think about this. I asked you in the beginning, right, how many hours do you spend playing game in a whole day? So if you spend 3 hours in a day playing your favorite game, what simplified ratio can you use to represent it? So you will write like 3:24, but as you know, it can be further simplified. How? If we divide by 3, we'll get what? 1:8. So it is our answer. So this way you can simplify your ratio. And I'll tell you in a later session we'll solve some problems what in NET we have they have asked, and also we'll talk about different kind of digit and numbers that we can find the answer. So let's talk about proportion. When we talk about proportion, it is like when you take two of these ratios and say they are the same. It's like if you made a small batch of lemonade for yourself and a big batch for a party. How you gonna do it? But you have to kept the taste exactly the same. So as in the beginning we talked about that if small batch used 1 cup of 1 cup of sugar with the 4 cups of water, and if we use for bigger batch, I mean if you add 2 cups of that sugar and you use double it, right, to the water, it'll be like 8 cups of water to keep the taste the same. So this is proportion in action, keeping the relationship between ingredients consistent no matter the size of your lemonade is. So I'll tell you about the direct proportion, inverse proportion and continued proportion. And in that continued proportion, you get most of your questions in your exam. And we'll talk about it in more details. We'll also talk about so many questions we'll solve, and then you'll be able to understand what is a ratio and proportion in your exam. Right. So first, let me tell you about the direct proportion. So, the direct proportion is a kind of, the relationship between two quantities in which the increases in one quantity, there is always increase in the other quantity also. Similarly, if one quantity is decrease, it will happen, the same with the other quantity, and that will also decrease. So hence, if A and B are two quantities, then the direction proportion is what written as A proportion to B. Right. Now let me tell you about inverse proportion. So the inverse proportion usually is what? The relationship between two quantities in which an increase in one quantity leads to what? Decrease in the other quantity. And similarly, if there is a decrease in one quantity, then obviously there will be increase in the other quantity. Therefore, the inverse proportion of two quantities, say A and B, is represented by A proportion 1 upon B. So that's our inverse proportion. And here where you get most of the question, which is continued proportion. So consider two ratio to be A is to B and C is to D. Then in order to find the continued proportion for two given ratio terms, we convert the means to a single term or number. So this would in general be a kind of LCM of means, that common factor. For the given ratio, the LCM of B and C will be what? B and C. And then what? We'll have to multiply the first ratio by C and the second ratio by B. We have first ratio like CABC. So second ratio will be obviously BC and BD. I'll tell you, you'll understand this in, with the example. And let me tell you about it. So here I've given one typical example that you always get, in exam, and that's how, these kind of ratio you get in your exam. So given ratio is like A is to B, we have the value 2 is to 3, right? 2 represent A and B represent 3. So in that way you can understand. And the second one we have got also B is to C, which is 5 and 2. And then C is to D, which is 1 is to 4. So we have already got our 4 value, right? A, B, C, D. So you have to put it in order. So how you're gonna do it? First you have to write down all, like here A, B, C, D, and then you have to put value. So as we know, A and B value we have 2 and 3. So we'll put it here 2 and 3. And then the next one, it says BC. So we have to find the common factor. So here in 2 we have B common factor. So we'll start with B here. So what we have, 5 and C values is 2. Now again we have C and D. So you have to find again in both, common factor here, which is C. So we'll start with C, which is like 1 is to 4. So we have filled this, and how you see 3, 3, 5 and 1, 1, because when ratio ends, we have to put that value to the remaining places. So here we have put 3 and 3, exactly the same way. When it happens in the beginning, if you have a gap, you have to fill with the value of whatever is starting, which is 5. And similarly here it is starting with 1, we have to fill all this 1. Now we have to multiply. When we multiply, we'll get the answer. What? 10. 5 into 2 is what? 10. Then we have 15, and then we have 6, and then we have 24. So in that way you can understand how this ratio works and how we can find all these A, B, C and D. So now let me tell you other examples which through solving, so you will understand the method how we solve this ratio problem. So let's begin. Okay, then let's solve the first question. Suppose if you are given this question, if A is to B equals to 2 is to 3 and B is also given, B is to C equals to 5, 7, and you're asked to find, first you have to find A is to C, and second you're gonna have to find A is to B is to C. So that you have to find. And how you're gonna do it, I'll tell you the perfect solution and very easy one. So you have to solve with, first you have to write down all the ratio that you have to find. So A is to B is to C. Now A, B is already given, like 2 is to 3. Now you have to find the common factor, and here you see B here and here. What is common? RB, right? This B. So we have to start here, like B is like 5, then C already given 7. And now you see there are gaps. So we have to suppose whenever the ratio ends here, we have to put like 3 is there, right? At the end is B. We can just fill it with 3. And similarly here in the third row you have to put 5 because it's beginning. We have to put 5. You can do that with multiple ratio, like A is to B is to C is to D. So similarly you have to do it. Now you have to multiply all this. And how you're gonna do that? Just multiply. Here 7, if you multiply 7 with 3 you'll get 21, right? And similarly here 3 into 5 is 15, and exactly we have to do it here. 5 into 2 is 10. So that is our ratio. That's how you are going to do for everything. So now the question is asking, you have to tell us what is A is to C. So we have to just put the value here. A, as you can see, is 10, and then C is what? 21. And exactly here it is asking the same. So now you have to put all the value, which is already this one, right? So just to answer that, it will be 10 is to 15 is to 21. So I hope in this method you'll be able to understand what we are talking about. So now I'm gonna give you a different example, which is completely, not your typical way to solve it, but it follows the same rule. So I'm gonna give you a completely different question here. If 4a is equals to 5b and 8b is equals to 9c, and you have to find what A is to B is to C. Now how you're gonna do that? So let me tell you. So when we shift this and make it as a fraction, the value will shift from each other, right? Suppose if we can write this A to B, it's the similar way, right? But here the value changes so that A becomes B's value. So it'll be 5 then 4. Similarly for the B value we get off that A1. So it's completely opposite here. So I hope you understand this one. Then what we're gonna do, we have to do the same with here B and C. So now if we can write like this, similarly it'll be like completely different. So here now similarly we have to do this. So here B's value becomes A's value, right? I mean C's value, and exactly the same C's value become of B's value. So let me write it like this: 9, then we have 8. So now we have simplified it, right? Now after simplifying, what we're gonna do, we can just find this one. Either you can write like this or even like this. A is to B is what? 5 and 4, right? Similarly here B is to C, you have 9 is to 8, right? Exactly the same way. Now what we have to find this ABC. What we're gonna do, we have to write A is to B is to C and put the value here. A, B, as we know, A's value is 5 and B's value is, you can see it's 4. And then again we have the common factor in both B. Let's start again here. 9 is to 8, right? Now as I told you before, we can just fill it with the same way that we did in our previous question. So here 4 is ending, we can just fill it with 4. Exactly the same way here, starting with 9, we can just put 9. Now when we solve it, we multiply. Now how are we gonna do that? 8 into 4 is what? 16, right? And 9 into 4 is what? 36. Exactly here is what? 9 into 5, 45, right? So we got the value. Now you see, so they have asked us about A, B, C. So when we solve this, we get A's value this, B's value 36 and C's value 16. Okay, let's solve another question. If it's given like that, A is 8 and then B is to 9 and here C to 12, and you have been asked this: find us A is to B is to C. So what is, actually it's the same way, right? If you can write like this, you can also write similarly like this. So it's kind of the same. So we have this value and we have b's value, which is 9, and we have c's value, which is 12, right? So how we gonna find this? Similar, we have to do this a b c, and then we have to put the value, which is a's value is 8, b's value is 9, and c's value is 12. So actually the answer is already given. Okay, let's solve another question. If a is to b, we have 1:3, and we have also have the value of bc, which is like 5:7. Okay, and we have also what c and d's value, which is 9 and 8. So we have to find a is to b is to c is to d. So a and b's value is already there, 1:3, and b and c value is already there, which is 5:7, and c and d's value is there, which is 9:8. Now how are we gonna solve this? Again, when it is more than one number, you can just follow the same trick that we have discussed. Like here, you can just put 3, all the filling you can do the same way, and in the beginning we have 5, right? And here we have 9, starting with 9, so we have to put 9 everywhere. You see, now we have to multiply. Here also we have to start with 7, right? Now we have to multiply. So if you multiply, we get 9 into 5 is what? 45. And if we do that, 45 into 3 will be like 135. And exactly the same way here is case 21 is 189. So, and again with the similar here, when we calculate, it will be 168. So we can also simplify that. It's not our complete answer, but if we simplify the finding, how are we gonna do this? It goes with 3. If you just see that 15, and then it's 45, then it's 63, exactly 56. So that is our answer. So we have been asked this, and our answer is here. Let me tell you completely different question here. If 5x plus 3y ratio 5x minus 3y equals to 3 and 1, then you have to find x to y. So can you tell me what is the answer here? First we have to simplify. So if the ratio is given like this, right, you can also write like this, right? 5x plus 3y upon, right, 5x minus 3y. You can write like this, right? It's a similar way. Either you can write in fraction or in this way. It's kind of similar. So what we're gonna do here now, so if the equation is given like that, then we have to multiply it. So if we do cross multiplication here, so the answer will be like 5x plus 3y upon, we have 3, which is 15x minus 9y. Now let's make this as a ratio. So if we do that, 5x plus 3y equals to 15x minus 9y. right? We can write like this. So when we just move it along the way, like x and x value, so if 5x and it comes here, it'll be like minus, right? 15x. Similarly here, if y goes there, then it'll be what? Into plus, right? So if 9 moves to there, it'll be plus, like 9y plus 3y. So if we just solve this, we'll get 10x equals to 12y. So our value is there, x and y, right? So we can also write like this, 10 into 12. If we can simplify more, it'll be like 5 to 6. So our answer is